Atlanta News First Plus starts now.
Thank you for joining us here at the First Alert Desk on Atlanta News First Plus as we take a look ahead at the news we're following in and around Metro Atlanta. It was a busy weekend, so I want to start by taking you out to Douglasville, where we have an update on a tragic story that we first brought to you on Saturday. A University of West Georgia student was killed over the weekend in this area. You're taking a look at some of the crime scene tape and police units that responded in connection to this deadly shooting. Now, it took place just after 1 p.m. on Saturday near King Highway in the back of a Dollar General, the parking lot area. Now, we heard earlier this morning from the Douglas County Sheriff's Office that confirmed she was a 19-year-old University of West Georgia student, that she and the suspect in this case had some sort of personal relationship. Now, the suspect was arrested about 12 hours after the incident when law enforcement tracked his vehicle near I-20. He is currently behind bars waiting for his first appearance in court, and that's taking place here in less than half an hour at 1:30. We're going to monitor and bring you the latest of what we learned from the investigation as it continues. And I want to talk about another major story that we will dominate headlines this week, a landmark trial stemming from a tragic and horrific school shooting back in September of 2024 at Apalachee High School. Well, today, jury selection begins in the trial of a father whose son is accused of killing 4 people in that shooting. Atlanta News First, Chelsea Bimeford joining me now to talk a little bit about what the room has really been like with jury selection and breaking down what we can expect in the week ahead. Chelsea?
Hey, Maria, good afternoon. We are in Hall County today. This is about 30 miles from Barrow County, where that school shooting took place. The purpose of that is that prosecutors, defense, and the judge all agreed that Colin Gray likely could not get a fair trial and a fair jury in Barrow County. This was a crime that was widely reported on. It affected all kinds of people, students, teachers, all kinds of people that lived in Barrow County. A lot of people knew about it, so that's why they decided to have the jury selection here in Hall County. So this morning they started around 9 a.m. screening about 36 different potential jurors, asking them a series of questions. I'm going to pull up my notes so I can read some of those to you, including things like, does anyone feel like they can't be fair about this case if they've already heard about it on the news? Has anyone ever had a gun shot at them? Does anyone feel like if a child does something wrong, that it is the parent's fault? And a large part of that is the crux of this case. Colin Gray's son, Colt, is accused of committing that school shooting, but Colin Gray is accused of giving his son the gun that he used to allegedly commit these deadly acts.
And Chelsea, this is not usually something that we see typically with another county's jurors looking over a case that is not necessarily in their neighborhood, but understandably with how widespread the coverage was surrounding this. What has the energy been like in the room? Because we talk about a school shooting, and that weighs heavy on a lot of hearts, even for those that aren't immediately connected to a situation like this.
Yeah, definitely. It was a very, very quiet room, very tense. I walked in as the defense was asking, again, a series of questions about gun control, about gun laws, about mental health. We also know from some previous pretrial hearings that Colin Gray and his wife split up and were evicted, and that had affected the mental health of his son, Colt Gray. So very, very tense, quiet, and intense atmosphere inside that courtroom today as they began jury selection.
Do you gauge any specific, seeing the attorneys ask their questions, any specific angles that you can see them pursuing?
So clearly prosecutors here are likely trying to prove that Colin Gray knew his son was a threat prior to giving him that gun. We've reported previously as well that in May of 2023, the FBI contacted local authorities here in the Barrow County area, Jackson, Georgia at the time, that that his son, Colt Gray, had allegedly made an online threat about a school shooting. We've seen body camera video where deputies showed up to their house to ask his father and son about this, and Colt Gray denied several times that he had made any threats of a school shooting. So at that point, though, his father knew that it was possible his son had made some sort of online threat. Prosecutors likely trying to prove that it was wrong, that he still gave his son a firearm for Christmas about 7 months after that discussion. And then we know that the following year that school shooting was carried out at Apalachee High School. But again, Colt Gray is the alleged shooter. He has not gone to trial. There was some discussion last spring that it might be reaching a plea deal, but then this past December, his defense attorney said his client was being screened for some mental health issues.
Yeah, really tragic story and important coverage that you're doing, and I know you'll have a report coming up for us. I want to take you back to the moment that we really heard that this was happening at Apalachee High School. I think you were involved in that coverage as well. Share your perspective with us.
Yeah, it's a story that I'll never forget reporting on. We were all in Atlanta around 9:30 in the morning at our morning pitch meeting, and we'd all been assigned to stories, and around 10 a.m. or so we walked out to the parking lot and we started hearing these police scanner calls and getting information about a possible shooter, and we dropped everything. A lot of us ran up to Apalachee High School, about an hour away from Midtown Atlanta. My photographer and I were about a mile from the school. They had a lot of entrances blocked off, and we were just on this side street that was blocked off, and parents were having to park kind of at the top of a hill and run a mile to get to their children at Apalachee High School. And it's chilling to think about. I mean, we had parents running up to us saying, "Do you know who's dead? Do you know who did it? Have you heard anything? Do you know the names of anybody?" And it was an incredibly emotional day. It affected a lot of people, like I said, in Barrow County, in Hall County, and surrounding counties, people that saw the news coverage, people that had children that attend that school or know a teacher that attended that school. Just an incredibly hard story to cover, and a hard story for the entire North Georgia community to swallow.
Yeah, and it's going to bring back a lot of memories for that community as we start to get into a trial like this, an emotionally charged one. Chelsea, we know you'll have a report again coming up in our afternoon and evening hours here on Atlanta News First. I'm going to let you get back inside that courtroom to follow along with what's happening. Now, we are following a different trial that I want to share with you folks. This one involving a cold case. In 2001, this case was first brought up with the University of Georgia law student was tragically killed in a horrific incident that for a while did not have a break in the case. We're talking about 25 years that it took for law enforcement to bring forward a suspect in the killing of Tara Baker. Now, Edric Faust, now charged with Baker's murder. Police say DNA evidence led to his arrest back in 2024. A forensics investigator and a former GBI crime lab expert testified last week, breaking down the gruesome details of what happened back in 2001. Now, last week, we did also hear arguments from state prosecutors who are urging the jury to bring down justice. Meanwhile, the defense is working to cast doubt on that evidence, arguing that investigators did not properly investigate Baker's boyfriend at the time back in the early 2000s. We are streaming this gavel to gavel as a court is underway right now, and I actually do want to take folks for a moment inside of that courtroom as we listen together in the cold case murder trial of UGA law student Tara Baker. Take a listen.
And forgive me if I didn't move to it.
It's not in evidence.
Please forgive me.
It is not in evidence. So is there an objection to, and we can talk about that later. Let's talk about the request that Mr. Cruz has just made. Do you have an objection to what he has just requested?
Just a foundation, Your Honor.
I will sustain that objection and allow you to lay a foundation.
Okay. And you've already stated that you remember talking to law enforcement about that. Is that right?
I do.
Okay. And you two specifically discussed the incident between you and Tara the week before she died. Is that right?
He asked the question, but I'm not hearing it correctly at the time. It was an incident that had happened in the past, but not the week before. But he does ask that question.
So let me do it this way. Did you admit to law enforcement that an incident occurred with you and Miss Baker the week before her death?
I would have to say yes, but it wasn't accurate.
Well, we can't have it both ways. First, you said it was months ago.
I'm going to object about editorializing about the witness's answers.
I'm going to sustain that objection.
Sure.
Mr. Cruz, just stick to your question.
Yes, ma'am. Your original answer was that this incident was months ago. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. But your answer now is you do remember the incident the week before she passed away.
I remember the question he asked, but and what I had described did not happen the week before.
But you told law enforcement it happened the week before.
He asked the question, and I gave an answer, but it was not the week before.
My specific... Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. My specific question is, did you tell law enforcement that the incident happened the week before her death?
He asked that question, and I did not say that it happened the week before. I went into an explanation of what, in my forefront of my mind, had at some point jeopardized our relationship.
Your Honor, I would renew my request to introduce minute marks 621 through 650 into evidence.
And that is just a little bit of what is currently happening inside of an Athens Clark County courtroom as week 2 of the trial of Tara Baker, a case that went cold for 25 years, now on display, and just the difficult work ahead for both sides in proving their argument and for this jury to make that ultimate life-altering decision. We're going to bring you both of those trials gavel to gavel on Atlanta News First Plus. You can go to our Courts and Trials channel, and you can find this coverage. The Tara Baker cold case murder trial begins at 9 a.m. each day up until the jury reaches deliberations, and we will bring you gavel-to-gavel coverage, meaning we will bring you all the way up until sentencing with our continuing coverage. I want to break in with some breaking news that we're following. This is taking folks to our AtlantaNewsFirst.com website as we are receiving reports of a plane crash along a busy Gainesville road, and apparently that plane hitting several vehicles, according to police. This is a picture. You're looking at a single-engine plane that had to make an emergency landing along Browns Bridge Road and Pearl Nicks Parkway. Police said that there are minor injuries. They did not give specifics on who exactly was injured and the extent of those injuries, but the road remains completely closed off, and drivers are being asked to either go around or expect traffic delays. We're working to piece together the details in really the extent of what happened here. But right now, this is the scene along, again, Pearl Nicks Parkway and Browns Bridge Road. We're going to stay on top of this story and bring you the latest and important reason to have the Atlanta News First news app so that you can get push alert notifications sent directly to your phone. And another major story that we are following here at Atlanta News First involving a new ICE facility that is in the works east of Atlanta. It's raising concerns among city leaders, residents, and human rights advocates. Alani Latang has the latest.
Immigration and Customs Enforcement detention facility is coming to Social Circle despite much opposition from city officials to residents to government accountability advocates.
It's just simply, bottom line, it's un-American.
The city announcing in a Facebook post, ICE is the new owners of this facility on East Hightower Trail, expected to house up to 10,000 people, double the city's population. City officials say the federal government hasn't contacted them or asked for any input. The city cites concerns of water and sewer capacity, also not having enough police and firefighters.
One of the questions that I have, how are they going to get this done? What's expected of us? How are they going to address all the water and sewer infrastructure needs?
Last week, city officials met with Congressman Mike Collins, who advised the city of the Department of Homeland Security's upcoming purchase.
And we're not solving an immigration problem here. We're not solving an immigration problem. We're putting forces in the streets.
Nonprofit advocacy group Indivisible Georgia is against the facility, fearing taxes will increase for residents. They also worry about the potential human and constitutional rights violated inside facilities, following ICE reporting more than 24 deaths in custody for 2025.
I think that what we're seeing, though, is that whether you're a criminal or not doesn't seem to matter in this regime. And we're certainly going to work as hard as we can to stop it.
Plus, concerns with the lack of information from the federal government.
I think the secrecy around this whole thing is something that everybody in America should be concerned about. It's not even a political issue. It's not how you believe pro or con about what ICE is doing or Homeland Security. I guess the question is, why does everything need to be a secret?
I'm Alani Latang, Atlanta News First.
And another major story that we are following, a U.S. District Court judge has ordered documents related to the Fulton County elections raid be unsealed by tomorrow night. Atlanta News First political reporter Doug Reardon and investigative producer Tim Darnell break down what this means for the investigation.
We are awaiting any moment now, and this can come at just about any moment or any minute or any second, the release of the federal government search warrant, the FBI search warrant, as it related to the late January 2026 federal government raid at the Fulton County Elections Hub and Election Central in Union City. I'm Tim Darnell, digital reporter, digital content producer here at Atlanta News First, joined by my good friend and colleague Doug Reardon, the hardest working political reporter in the Southeast. Doug, I was just settling in on Sunday, getting ready for the Super Bowl, when I saw an alert from Atlanta News First that a federal judge has actually ordered the U.S. Department of Justice to unseal virtually all of the details, with the exception of some officials' names, which we are expecting to be redacted. But all of the details related to this stunning search warrant that happened toward the end of January. It was arguably one of the biggest political stories of this young year so far. I'm sure we're going to have plenty more. But we are anticipating now that the federal government, the U.S. Department of Justice, will, any minute now, unseal all of the details related to the FBI search warrant. This is a really stunning, the latest stunning development to what was a very shocking Elections Hub search warrant execution at the end of January.
Yeah, and I was in the same boat. My Patriots were playing last night, and I got that alert, and then things just kind of went downhill from there. So, but it was big news. This is something that right off the top, right, disclosure-wise, we should note that we were part of a lawsuit along with several other media groups, including most of the local TV affiliates, the Associated Press, CNN, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, that had also taken legal action to get this search warrant unsealed. And I think if anyone is wondering why it is so important that we have this document, it is because it will tell us why they were there in the first place. We know that there was kind of a supplementary affidavit, if you will, that was released that kind of listed two of the charges that they were there to investigate. One had to do with a loss that requires states, and specifically in this case Georgia, to store ballots for up to 22 months after the election. They had to store them legally for much longer because there were lawsuits playing out, there were challenges playing out, and so those ballots were, kind of the focus of a lot of fights over the course of the last 6 years. And so that was one of the reasons. The other one had to do with a law that prohibits incorrectly tabulating votes, and we can only suspect that that had something to do with the ticker tape admission that came out a couple of weeks ago, where it was discovered that Fulton County workers had signed ticker tapes that they hadn't reviewed. Those ticker tapes are basically like receipts that you get that the machine spits out when you go and tabulate ballots, and even Fulton County said, we messed that one up, that's on us. It was about 150,000 votes that were incorrectly certified as admitted by the county. So those are our best guesses, but that is all that we have right now to kind of dictate why the FBI was there, how they were able to go and take this, I hate to use the word unprecedented, but how they were able to take this unprecedented move of just showing up to an elections hub, and leaving with 700 boxes of ballots from an entire county's election. And so this will tell us a lot more about the legal standing for them to be able to do that, and kind of the evidence that they were reviewing that allowed this warrant to be issued by a federal judge. We should get that sometime, as you said, in the next couple of days or so. We know that Tuesday, close of business, is the deadline that was set by Federal Judge Brule in making this order to release these documents, including that search warrant.
You mentioned Judge Brule. He was an appointee of President Donald Trump to the U.S. Northern District of Georgia Federal Circuit. This order came down Sunday afternoon, late afternoon, early evening, as I recall. You were on scene, and you were reporting live from the Union City, Georgia, and South Fulton County, where the elections hub and headquarters are located. And it was very unusual when we began seeing reports. This was on January 28th, that Tulsi Gabbard, who was the director of national intelligence, was on the scene. That has caused a lot of confusion and a lot of controversy.
It has. It was confusing to us when we heard, I'll be honest with you, in a parking lot full of really smart, intelligent reporters, we were all really confused as to why Tulsi Gabbard, who is essentially the spy chief of the United States, was coming down to the FBI hub that day, within a few hours of the raid, to kind of survey the scene. Of course, national security and elections don't always have a clear crossover, and so it was confusing as to why the person who is in charge of the nation's intelligence would be having to do with what she would have to do with an FBI raid in Fulton County. It suggests that they are looking at some type of foreign interference, perhaps, in that 2020 election. Of course, we know that this is an election that has been audited, reviewed, investigated multiple times, including by the Republican-led House and Senate here in Georgia, and there was no evidence of fraud, and there was no evidence of anything that would have tipped the scales in the favor of Donald Trump in this state. But still, her presence there certainly suggests the desire to look into some sort of foreign tie to the 2020 election, and that is about all we know. Maybe there will be more. We hope that there will be more in the search warrant that would kind of indicate why people like Tulsi Gabbard were there that day instead of just, FBI officials.
And it'll be interesting to see if her name or other federal officials' names are actually redacted from this report. We're talking about over 600 boxes that were all related to Fulton County's 2020 presidential election. We're all familiar with the phone call, and you can listen to the phone call on Atlanta News First in all of our elections coverage. The very famous phone call that Donald Trump made from the White House in early January 2021. His chief of staff, Mark Meadows, was also on the line making this phone call to Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, asking the Secretary of State to help find a certain number of votes. Can't recall, 13,000, several thousand votes that would help.
11,780.
11,700. You got it memorized. I knew you would.
Yeah.
To help him win Georgia and possibly win his 2020 election bid. That obviously did not happen. Now the federal government, the Department of Justice, the FBI, is in possession of those 600 and some odd boxes of tabulator tapes, perhaps, ballot records, perhaps. Fulton County Commission Chairman Rob Pitts has been very vocal that he does not know where these ballots are. He does not know what's being done to them. There's obviously a little bit of a fear and apprehension on Fulton County officials' parts that when these ballots, if they are ever returned, that they're going to come up with a little bit of a different result than what happened in 2020.
Yeah, and Pitts was very clear. By the way, the county has sued to get those ballots back. They filed that lawsuit last week. But, Pitts' fear, a lot of fear from Democratic state lawmakers, federal state lawmakers like John Ossoff, who told me this just last week. Their concern is that those are the original ballots. There is no more authentic version of those votes than what the FBI came in and got out of that warehouse in Union City. And so the fear among a lot of people who are opposed to this move is that you have the originals. There's no way for us to check your work. So whoever is investigating this, whoever has these ballots, by the way, we still don't have the answers to either of those questions. When they look at them, if they find something that they say is nefarious, or if there are results that look different than the results did back in 2020 and 2021 when these audits were being done, there's no way for anyone to really call them out on those results because those are the original ballots. There's nothing to cross-reference them with. Rob Pitts went as far to say last week in filing that lawsuit as saying, I felt comfortable telling Fulton County citizens that I could protect their ballots a couple of days ago, and now I can't make that assurance because I don't have them. And so, again, it is important for people to know that those are the original ballots. They are the real thing, and the concern is that if there is something found, as Donald Trump said, things are going to come out in Fulton County. There's really no way for anyone to cross-reference that.
It's very interesting, just the political dynamics that are working not only nationally and locally, but also locally here in Fulton County. We have Fulton County Commission Chairman Rob Pitts, whom you have interviewed for our weekly political show on Atlanta News First called On the Record, who is running for re-election as Fulton County Commission Chairman, but he also has a challenger, Fulton County Commissioner Marvin Arrington Jr., who has kind of gone out of his way to take credit for this lawsuit that was filed last week. Fulton County, as you mentioned, has filed a lawsuit seeking the return of all of these 600 and some odd boxes of elections records related to 2020, if I can enunciate correctly. What's the political dynamic between Arrington and Pitts? Because I think, as I recall from some of your reporting, Arrington is also challenging and hoping to become the next chairman of the Fulton County Commission.
Yeah, and as we understand it, that is still the case. He is one of the challengers that is coming from Rob Pitts' own board. There's always politics at play, right? We always say it's always an election year in Georgia. Right. And, of course, that's the case. Marvin Arrington, who many people know his father, Marvin Arrington Sr., who was a very influential person here in Atlanta and served in many different roles in leadership. But, I remember when I asked Rob Pitts about Arrington Jr. running against him as a member of his own board, he said his father would be rolling over in his grave. So this is obviously an adversarial relationship when it comes to any campaigning that will be done between Rob Pitts and Marvin Arrington Jr. And so, Marvin Arrington Jr. was for sure out there that day, and then in subsequent days afterwards, and even up until, the end of last week, has been a very outspoken voice on this raid and has really tried to put himself at the helm of this fight to get those ballots back. And so, you can only assume that, as any good politician would do, they would seize on the opportunity to take hold of a big story and try and, make themselves the hero of it, certainly. Now, eventually, we did learn that the lawsuit that Fulton County filed was actually, and he even said this in his press conference, Rob Pitts versus the United States of America. So it was very clear who actually went ahead and filed this lawsuit. Was it political? Probably. In election years, you got to do stuff to stand out. And I think both of these men are certainly, putting themselves at the fore of this fight over these ballots in Fulton County. And it's very likely because voters will have to themselves go to the polls and elect one of them in the upcoming election.
I want to go back for just a moment to the 130,000 tabulator tapes that Fulton County elections officials admitted they miscalculated last year. And that was, if I recall our metrics correctly, that was one of our leading stories for that week and for a couple of weeks here on Atlanta News First. It was picked up by a number of national news outlets and reported by several national news outlets. That has kind of rekindled the controversy going back to the 2020 election. You have a lot of loyalists for President Donald Trump saying, see, now the truth is coming out. We have uncovered the fact that Fulton County did indeed miscalculate some ballots related to the 2020 election. Others who are opponents of the president and his current administration are continuing to point out to the fact that Fulton County has repeatedly been cleared of any wrongdoing or any nefarious undertakings as it relates to the counting of the ballots in 2020. Take us a little bit deeper into the discussion of why these tabulator tapes are so important to what's going on in the current environment.
Yeah, they are very important. They're kind of the last line of defense, if you will. They're the last line of double checking that happens when election workers are going through the process of kind of certifying these election results. Like I said earlier, they're the receipts that these ballot machines spit out. They allow you to see how many people have voted, and they allow you to cross-reference that with the number of votes that you actually have. The ballots up against the people, right, to make sure that those numbers match. They print it out. I'm not kidding. It literally looks like a receipt you get at CVS. You look at the votes, you look at the voters, and you got to have those two numbers match. Now, there were instances, as you mentioned, about somewhere between 130 and 150,000 of those that did not match. They were still signed off on, though, by election workers at Fulton County. The county, at a recent elections board hearing, admitted that that was something that happened. They took full responsibility for it, however, admitted that it was negligible in the ultimate results of the election. Even Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger called it, in his words, a clerical error, and said that it did not taint the security, the fairness of that election in 2020. But of course, with a certain segment of the Georgia population who feels like there was something wrong in that 2020 election, it certainly seemed to be a canary in the coal mine for them. It was something to grasp onto, to point and say, look, something did go wrong. It was a bit of hope for that contingency of people who still believe that there was something wrong with the 2020 election. And certainly they're right. I mean, that's not good. You don't want your elections workers to be signing off on tabulator tapes that don't match or that haven't been reviewed by the proper people. And Fulton County admitted as such. But again, we are not even close to talking about an 11,000 vote differential when we talk about, some of the votes that, again, it doesn't mean that they were fraudulent. It just means the paperwork was not done correctly, right? And so I think that was an important distinction that people like Secretary of State Raffensperger were making, in that it's not that there were 150 fraudulent votes, it's just that those tabulator tapes accounted for that number of votes, and they just weren't signed correctly. It doesn't taint, as he said, the accuracy of the votes themselves or the legitimacy of the vote themselves. It was a chain of custody issue that went wrong. Fulton County admitted as such, but it really gave some folks something to latch onto here. And I think they're the same contingency of folks who were expecting to find something in these 700 boxes of ballots that were carted off last month.
What are the chances, from your point of view, of these ballots actually being returned to Fulton County? Rob Pitts, and as we have been talking about, and county officials have filed a lawsuit seeking the return of the 600 some odd boxes of election ballots, tabulator tapes, who knows what else, election records related to the 2020 election, wanting these boxes returned. What are the chances that lawsuit is actually going to have any effect at all? And if so, what kind of conditions will these records be returned to the county? Will they be in a pristine condition, or will they show evidence of tampering or something else? Just give me a little bit of speculation here.
Yeah, it's hard to say for sure whether or not the request by Fulton County to return those ballots will be granted. They're arguing that it was a Fourth Amendment violation, that it was basically an unlawful search and seizure of ballots. Keep in mind that ballots can contain some personally identifying information for people, their names, their birth dates, their social security. Does the government have that already? Very likely. But again, it's another source that people just don't want their information getting out there from. Hard to say if the judge will see it the way that Rob Pitts does, in saying that those ballots do belong to the county. I think having the search warrant eventually will tell us a little bit more about how legitimate the government's case was in going in to get them. But again, we just very recently, in our most recent episode of On the Record, spoke to Sally Grubbs, who's a member of the State Elections Board, and I asked her point blank, I said, I know you support the fact that there should be more review into the election, that maybe something went wrong with the 2020 election, but don't you want to know where the ballots are as someone who's a member of the State Elections Board? And what she said I thought was very insightful, where she was like, look, if the FBI and the government or whoever has to have these documents, I think there should be a protective order put in place for the Elections Board, at the very least, to be able to have the information about where these ballots are being kept, what's being done with them, can they be involved in the investigation. It would just give Georgia some sort of in and some sort of tie to whatever is going to happen with these ballots, whether or not they are returned. And I think that's what everybody, from Republican members of the State Elections Board to the Republican Secretary of State to Democratic Senator John Ossoff, want assurances on is, will these ballots be handled properly, and will we know the true outcome of whatever the investigation is going to be? That seems to be the universal thing across everyone here in Georgia.
This is all happening in a critical election year. 2026, Georgia is home to some of the most nationally watched midterm elections going on this year. We have wide open seats in governor's mansion, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, attorney general. John Ossoff is fending off a very tough election challenge from the Republican Party. Who knows who that candidate will be? What are the political ramifications moving forward of the fact that we are now only just moments, minutes, seconds, hours away from the release of details regarding the search warrant at the Fulton County Elections Hub in late January? How is this going to play out in one of the most nationally watched midterm election states in the nation?
It is definitely something that people are thinking about. Senator Ossoff in his rally this weekend said that they're up to mischief, is what he called it, with the 2026 election. A lot of politicians at the state level have told me this is more about 2026 than it is about 2020 because, there are some rumblings that maybe Democrats may have a big swing. We've already had a lot of retirements or upcoming retirements and resignations from the House in the Georgia delegation. 4 on the Republican side already, between people running and people who have retired, like Marjorie Taylor Greene, recently Barry Loudermilk. And so there is a lot of potential for shakeup. And the prevailing thought on the side of many Democrats and many progressives in the state is that this was just a move to intimidate voters. This was a move to flex the power of the federal government and say, we didn't like what you did in 2020. We can really do a whole lot about it in 2026 as the midterms approach here. And so the prevailing thought among a lot of people who didn't support this raid is that it was more about the upcoming midterms than it was about that election 6 years ago, and kind of, a show of force, if you will, by the federal government to just come in, grab these ballots and say, we can do this again if we have to.
Well, this will be one of the most important, one of the biggest and most widely anticipated developments this week in Georgia politics. That being, we are awaiting the release of all of the details regarding the search warrant that led the Federal Bureau of Investigation to execute a search warrant last month at the Fulton County Elections Hub, Election Central, where they seized several hundred boxes related to the results of the 2020 presidential election in Fulton County. We will have all of the late-breaking details. We will have the story when the records are actually released. You will be able to read and watch all of them as it plays on Atlanta News First. For Doug Reardon, I'm Tim Darnell.
And I do want to get folks back out to the breaking
We are
news
awaiting
that we're following
any moment
here.
now, and this can comment just about any moment or any minute or any second.
A little bit of technical issues, but if you can bear with us, we just want to show you the situation of what's going on right now
search
on
warrant,
Browns
as it
Bridge Road
related
and
to
Pearl
the
Nicks Parkway.
late
This is in the
January
Gainesville area.
2026 federal government raid at the Fulton County Elections Hub and Election Central in Union City. I'm Tim Darnell, digital reporter reporter,
an
digital
emergency
content producer
landing, and at
here
some
at
point,
Atlanta News
while
First,
being on the ground,
joined by my good
appeared to
friend
have
and
crashed
colleague Doug
into,
Reardon,
at
the
least
hardest
one
working
vehicle
political
along
reporter
this
in the
busy roadway,
Southeast.
the area of
Doug,
Brownsbridge
I
Road
was
and
just
Pearl Nicks
settling
Parkway. There
in
are some
on Sunday,
businesses in
getting
the
ready
area,
for the Super
a
Bowl,
lot of
when I
cars
saw
usually
an
on
alert
this
from
road.
Atlanta News First that
Luckily
a
not
federal
at this
judge
time. There
has
were
actually
less so,
ordered
but
the
nevertheless,
U.S.
we
Department of
are
Justice to
showing you now
unseal
that small plane,
virtually
again,
all
in
of the
Gainesville,
details, with the exception
on
of
the
some
road. A vehicle
officials'
was just
names,
towed
which
away
we are
moments
expecting
ago,
to be
and you can see some
redacted.
extensive
But
damage
all
to
of
the
the
front and
details
side
related
of that
to
car.
this
We have
stunning
been told that there are
search
minor
warrant that
injuries. We have
happened
not
at
been
the
told
end,
who
toward the
exactly
end
was injured
of
or the
January. It
condition
was
of
arguably
the
one of the biggest
operator of the
political
plane or the
stories of
driver.
this young
We are
year
working to learn
so
that
far.
for
I'm
you,
sure we're
and
going to
we'll
have plenty
bring you
more.
the latest
But we
details.
are
Now, authorities did not
anticipating
elaborate
now
further on the
that
extent
the
of what
federal
they meant
government,
by
the
those minor
U.S.
injuries.
Department of
That
Justice,
road
will
right now
any minute
completely
now
closed off as
unseal
crews
all
work
of
to
the
clear that
details
plane off the
related
roadway,
to the FBI search
conduct their
warrant.
investigation,
This is
of course,
a
and
really
safely reopen it
stunning,
to traffic. But right
the
now, if you're a
latest
driver, if you're
stunning
someone who takes this
development
road,
of
you are
what
being
was
asked to
a
avoid
very
the area
shocking
or expect traffic
elections
delays. I'm going
hub
to take this full
search
for you.
warrant
You can really
execution.
see what we're seeing. As you can see, a number of crews, authorities, police vehicles, and a fire truck all responding. And again, if you were with us just moments ago, you saw a car being towed away. Bear with us on the technical difficulties. This is our first alert chopper over the scene in Gainesville along Brownsbridge Road and Pearl Nicks Parkway. There is a Pizza Hut in the area. There are other businesses in the area. We know right now that there were minor injuries in this crash. We don't know why the plane had to make that emergency landing or the extent of the operator of the plane, but right now we are again bringing you that live picture of the situation in Gainesville. A wider angle showing you really the extent of the traffic impacts in the area, and that single engine plane is still smack dab in the middle of the roadway. Our first alert chopper over Brownsbridge Road. That plane has been there for almost an hour at least. We do know that the authorities that have responded have perimetered the area. They are conducting their investigation. There's also a crew trying to clear debris and figure out how to move that plane off of the road so that traffic can resume. We know at least one vehicle was significantly damaged. We are told that multiple vehicles were involved as this plane came down on this roadway. And you can see kind of where it's sitting between two of the opposing lanes. Do bear with us on the technical difficulties. Our first alert chopper really showing you this picture, and we're kind of learning with you as we're looking at this. Our Atlanta News First crew is en route to this location to hopefully bring us a on-the-ground perspective. But I can tell you, I see some people lining up near the crime scene tape, the police tape that is blocking off access to this. Some officials now approaching the plane and examining different areas of it. Again, we are still piecing together really what exactly led to this plane needing to make an emergency landing and then crashing into those vehicles. We're still working to learn how the drivers and the plane's operator are doing at this moment. We do know there are minor injuries. We don't know the extent of those injuries. That is right now where we are, but you can see what appears to be a police officer speaking with at least two folks. We don't know their connection to this incident, but they seem to be examining the plane together. Again, this is a single-engine aircraft on a road that a plane usually does not belong on. Browns Bridge Road and Pearl Nicks Parkway is a commercial space. There's a gas station. There's restaurants in the area. Right now, that entire intersection is closed off to traffic, and we do not have an ETA at the moment of when that will open up. All right, folks, sorry about that. Just coming back here as I talk to our crews in the field. Again, we are still waiting to get you an on-the-ground shot,
At
an
the end of
on-the-ground
January.
perspective from our Atlanta News
Yeah,
First
and
crew.
I was in the
did
same
just
boat.
reach
My
out to
Patriots
them
were playing
to make
last
sure
night,
that they
and
could tell
I
us
got that
when
alert,
they're
and then
expected
things
to
just
arrive. And
kinda
as
went
soon as we
downhill
get that,
from there.
we
So,
will bring you
but
another
it was big
perspective
news.
of what we're
This
looking
is
at
something
here.
that,
Just to
right off the
reiterate, because we see a
top,
few
right,
people
disclosure-wise,
jumping
we
onto
should
this
note that,
stream of what we are looking
we were
at
part
right
of
now.
a
This is a
lawsuit
single-engine
along with
aircraft
several other
that had to
media
make an
groups, including most
emergency
of the local
landing
TV affiliates,
along
the
this
Associated
busy
Press,
Gainesville
CNN,
road,
the Atlanta
specifically
Journal-Constitution,
Brownsbridge
that had
Road
also
and
taken
Pearl
legal
Nicks
action to
Parkway.
get
Now,
this search
police
warrant unsealed.
said that the
And I
plane
think
crashed
if
into
anyone is
multiple
wondering
vehicles,
why
and we
it is
saw
so
one of those
important that we
vehicles
have this
with damage to the front
it is
and
because
side
it will
being
tell us
towed
why they
away
were there
about
in the first
20
place. We
minutes
know that there
ago.
were there's kind of
We
a
have seen a
supplementary
couple other
affidavit,
vehicles
if you
as
will,
well,
that was released
but
that
those
kind of
appear
listed
to be
two
currently
of
out
the
of the
charges
shot
that they
from
were
what
there
you
to
were looking at
investigate. One
from our
had to
First
do
Alert chopper.
with a
Not a
law
whole lot of
that
information right
requires
now.
states,
We do know that there are minor
specifically in this
injuries.
case
The
Georgia,
extent of the
to
injuries
store
or
ballots for up to
who may
22
be
months
injured
after the
is
election.
not known
They
at
had to
this
store
time. We're
them
working to learn
legally
more
for
about
much
the
longer
operator
because
of the
there
plane
was
and
there
the
were
drivers
lawsuits playing out, there were
involved.
challenges
Now,
playing
law
out,
enforcement
and so,
clearing
those
this
ballots
area,
were, kind of
creating
the
a perimeter
focus of a lot of
so
fights over the course
traffic
of the
cannot
last 6
come
years.
through, obviously,
And
while they
so,
conduct their
that was one of the
investigation
reasons.
and
The
clear
other one
debris and
had
manage to
do
find a way to
with,
get this
a
plane
law that
off
prohibits
of the road.
incorrectly
In the meantime,
tabulating
drivers
votes. We can
are asked
only
to
suspect
avoid
that
the
that had
area
something to
or
do
at
with
least
the
expect
ticker tape
that delay to
admission that came
continue
out a
on
couple
for a
of
while.
weeks
There's
ago, where
no
it was discovered
expected
that,
clear time
Fulton
right
County
now
workers had
as
signed ticker tapes that they hadn't
officials
reviewed. Those
respond
ticker
to
tapes
this
are basically
scene.
like
We saw
receipts that you get
fire
that the
trucks,
machine spits out when
police,
you go
the
and
sheriff's
tabulate
office,
ballots.
a couple
And,
other
even
vehicles.
Fulton County
Just
said
from
we
looking at
messed that
First
one
Alert
up.
Chopper,
That's on
again,
us.
this
It was
is
about
not confirmed
150,000
information on
votes
who
that
all
were
is involved,
incorrectly certified
but just
as
recognizing
admitted by
some
the
of those
county. So
vehicles,
those
we
are our
see
best
that this
gets.
was
Best
all
guesses,
hands
but
on
that
deck
is all that we
response
have
to
right
this
now to
area.
kind of dictate
We do
why
understand
the
that there
FBI
was
there,
some
how
sort of
they were able
emergency
to go
landing
and
that
take
had
this.
to be made
I hate to use
that
the word
then turned
unprecedented,
into
but
a
how they were
crash
able to
involving
take this
multiple vehicles.
unprecedented move of
Again, the
just
latest of what we're
showing up
following
to an
here
election
on
hub
Atlanta News
and
First. I'm going to leave you with this shot as I touch base with some of our crews and the folks behind the scenes in the newsroom talking to officials, trying to piece together exactly what we're looking at here. We're going to bring you any and all information that we get on this right here on this live stream, so hang tight with us. In the meantime, this is a live First Alert Chopper picture showing you the situation in Gainesville.
Even
All right,
with
folks, it looks like we
700
did lose
boxes
our
of
First Alert
ballots from an
Chopper
entire
shot
county's
here.
election.
We are
And
going to
so
come
this
down
will
for
tell
a
us
bit,
a lot
continue
more
to bring
about
you
the
coverage
legal
on
standing
air
for
and
them to be
online
able to do
for
that,
you of this
and
developing
kind of the
situation.
evidence
If you
that
have
they
the Atlanta
were
News
reviewing
First
that
News app,
allowed
that is
this
a
warrant
great
to be issued
tool
by a federal
for
judge.
situations like these where we can send you alerts straight to your phone when we get any new developments and live breaking news. We are going to still, like I mentioned, touch base with our crews. If we have another live perspective to show you, we will carry that coverage for you right here on ANF Plus. In the meantime, our coverage continues with Atlanta News First News at 3. ATL Live is up next.
Thank you for watching ANF Plus. For more breaking news, live coverage, and your community stories, download the Atlanta News First app. You can also watch us on YouTube, Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. To join the conversation on YouTube Live, visit our channel and hit subscribe. You can also listen to the Atlanta News First podcast by searching Atlanta News First on your preferred listening platform.